Hey, hey, hey. There we are. We're off to the races. Zerilath Eternal is here. I am doing a thing. Alright, so I have picked as my next trick a conversation about the Jews. So, alright. I've been meaning for a couple of years to read Josephus War, the Jewish War, this book. I've heard some crazy things about this book, right? So, a couple of disclaimers because I do not know what is specifically going to be said in here because I have listened to so much good work on the Jewish conspiracy that I have heard things from this book cited before. So I have a taste. And the manner in which I handle things is never to be taken lightly. And is not designed to alienate, ostracize, dehumanize, criminalize, yada, yada, yada. This is part of an investigation. This is just an investigation. Because if the world, if my nation insists that the Jews in Israel are important, then we have to have a certain conversation about them. And that involves having knowledge to talk about. And thus, we are going to do this and find answers. And find out who is and who is not to blame for anything, whether real or imagined. And thus I have Locke with me, because in order to handle the Jews, I must have my reptilian handler to tell me what I think and feel about it. Right? Right? You're going to keep me in line? See, he's telling the Dracos right now. Right now, it's just like, you nuke him. You nuke him right now. He's vegan, you know. Hey, squirt. All right. Ooh, and he's gonna dig into me. I had to go with the vest today. I just had to go with the vest. And I said, I'm going to have my iguana, and I'm going to wear a vest, because I don't want to wear a shirt. Come on, buddy. There you go. All right. He'll be fine. All right, so I'm going to do with this book things that I normally don't do. So I'm gonna really kind of like read through like introductions and prefaces and things like that. I want to have a little bit more of a thorough connection, because doing this at this time will be targeted by people who want to target such a thing. All right. This is a founder, editor from 1944 to 64, E.V. Ryu, Robert Baldick, and Betty Radice. Josephus was born in about 37 A.D. He was one of the Jewish leaders at the time of the revolt of the Jews in the reign of Nero. He commanded in Galilee and was captured by the Romans, but his life was spared. Spending the rest of his life in Rome, he was given Roman citizenship and became a friend of Titus and Vespasian. His two most important works are said to be the Jewish War, and the Jewish Antiquities. G.A. Williamson was born in 1895 and was a classical exhibitor at Worcester College, Oxford, graduating with a first-class honors degree. He was Senior Classics Master of Norwich School from 1922 to 1960. Let me make sure my crazy... Okay, good. Just making sure my mic is working on both sides. I feel like I should be up. I probably need to be up more. That's probably better. Okay. Because I don't have anybody in the chat letting me know how I'm doing. All right. Translation and introduction by G.A. Williamson. Okay. Oops. All right, that's all just technical jargon. This book is sold subject to the condition that it shall not, by way of trade or otherwise, be lent, resold, hired out, or otherwise circulated without the publisher's prior consent in any form of binding or cover other than that which it is published, and without a similar condition, including this condition being imposed on the subsequent purchaser. So does this facsimile to digital PDF count? Sorry, but does Penguin even exist anymore? Somebody's obviously got to own this, right? But I got the fair use going on anyway, right? So usually fair use on YouTube works for this kind of stuff, unless, of course, I'm being too provocative with the subject matter and the context in which I wrap it in. Hey, what's up, Matthew? All right, so here's our list of chapters, and we'll see how we do. I'm sure we'll get to at least through chapter 1. This doesn't look like it's a heavy read. It's like 400 pages or so. All right. Introduction. History, we are told, is the record of the crimes and follies of mankind. Anyone reading the Jewish War will certainly feel this to be true. It is a tale of unrelieved horror, of brutalities committed by Herod and other Palestinian kings, by provincial governors, by the most enlightened and reasonable of the Roman emperors, by the leaders of the Jewish insurgents, and by Josephus himself. It is a tale of hopeless revolts, of suicidal strife between rival gangsters and warring factions, of incredible heroism achieving nothing but universal ruin and destruction. It is a tale, too, of a country filled with such a wealth of architectural and artistic splendor as has perhaps never been seen elsewhere since the world began, and reduced by crimes and follies to a desert, a mass of shapeless ruins. Yet it is a tale of surpassing interest, a tale of achievement nonetheless, magnificent because they ended in dust. Has any country had such a history as Palestine has had? A history so colorful, so rich in incidents that grip the imagination, stir the emotions, and haunt the memory? Does any country possess a geographical character so astounding in its diversity, so fascinating in its uniqueness? In this book, we have a graphic record of the most exciting period of that history. We have, too, some remarkable descriptions of many of the geographical features, and a great deal of space is given up to bringing before our eyes the cities, palaces, and temples which filled this little land with beauty and made it one of the greatest creations of Hellenism, as different as could be imagined from the Palestine of our Sunday school memories. Here, too, we find the information that will serve as the necessary background for our understanding of recent research in Palestine, of the excavations of Jericho and Masada, and the world-shaking discovery of Qumran, both of an Old Testament Testament manuscripts 1,000 years older than any previously discovered, and of the rules and doctrines of a mysterious sect which seems to have been no other than the Essenes. That remarkable community, which though never mentioned in the New Testament, is so fully described in this book. But for those who hold Palestine dear because it was the land trodden by a Savior's feet, the book has a unique interest. Here we have a work written in the same language as the Gospels and at almost the same time, describing events, many which happened in the period covered by the New Testament record, while many others are mostly vivid, foretold in the Synoptic Gospels. Men who figure so largely in the story of Christ and his infant church, men about whom every inquiring reader must have longed to know more: Herod the Great, Archelaus, Antipas, Pontius Pilate, and the two Agrippas, Felix and Festus, Bernice, are here portrayed from a different angle and in an enormously greater detail, so that new light is shed on their character, a light that illumines but does not impact the scriptural portraits. Was Herod indeed great? Was he monster enough to order the butchery of innocent babes? And what sort of city was the Jerusalem that Christ entered in triumph, over which he wept? What sort of building was the temple that at 12 years old he called his father's house, and from whose court he later drove the sheep and the oxen? To these and many such questions Josephus provides the answer. I have referred to events foretold in the Synoptic Gospels. I am thinking, of course, of the destruction of Jerusalem and the signs that preceded it. Had we no other source of information than the Gospels, we should be tempted to suspect that the warnings of Jesus were couched in hyperbolical language, not intended to be taken literally. Was it possible that of that mighty temple, not one stone should be left upon another that should not be cast down? It was indeed possible. It is historical fact. The destruction was utter and complete, and the successive stages by which it was carried out, Josephus gives us a full and terrible account. The whole tragic story had been foretold with startling accuracy, and the event itself, we have an eyewitness's description that omits no detail of the horror. It was startling accuracy of our Lord's warning that led critics of a generation ago, committed to the principle that every prophecy is written after the event, a principle of which there is not a shred of justification in science, philosophy, or experience, to allege that the great prophecies recorded by Matthew, Mark, and Luke were borrowed from later works of apocalyptic or eschatology and put into Christ's mouth. These critics overlooked several facts, leaving out of count the transparent honesty of the gospel writers. We notice that while these late works were concerned with the end of the world, Christ was obviously thinking much more about events which his own generation was to witness. The disciples, Matthew tells us, had asked him a double question about the destruction of the temple and about his own final coming. And he gave them a double answer, the first part of which most vividly foretold the occurrences destined to be so fully described by Josephus. He made it clear to his audience how the imminence of those occurrences was to be recognized and instructed them what they were to do when warning signs were observed. This the Christians remembered and carried out. Before the city was encompassed by its enemies, they fled to Pella and so escaped the general destruction. It is hard to account for this escape if the prophecy was written after the event. So the annotation that was above earlier is about the Wailing Wall, which was never part of the temple itself. For an excellent account of Jerusalem's ancient modern reader, right? Yeah, the Wailing Wall was a Roman fortification that was destroyed. So when they are praying at the Wailing Wall, what they're doing is, and this has been demonstrated recently with some other videos and such. For one thing, they are having coitus with it. They are thrusting their pelvises at the wall, sympathetic magic of their loyalty to Rome, because it's a Roman fort, and what they're doing is they're asking for the world government to come in, reestablish the defense of Palestine to keep their Jerusalem in this idea of the state of Israel going. That's what their rituals at the Wailing Wall are for, right? It's the Wailing Wall. If they can get the fortress built, the fortress brings in the Romans, aka the Americans, if it's done in this present world, and with that they have the protection to build the temple. You see how that works? Okay. And here we should note that the threatened destruction of the city as distinct from the temple was not completely carried out until the collapse of Bar Kokhba. I think that's either Koch or Koch. Bar Kokhba or Bar Kokhba's revolution, and the capture of Jerusalem by Hadrian in AD 135. That would be the same Hadrian who built the wall. A date long after the writing and circulation of all four Gospels, as recent discoveries of New Testament papyri have established beyond question, so that at least some part of the prophecy must have been published before the event. We should observe also that in addition to the remarkable prophecies recorded by Matthew and Mark, and somewhat differently by Luke, we have another in John's account of our Lord's conversation with the woman of Samaria. And Samaria, see John 4:21. Okay, you're just going to give me that once in a while? Ugh, lazy. Anyway, and what is more important, the almost innumerable hints conveyed by his laments over Jerusalem, its women and unborn children, and by such unquestionably authentic passages as the parables of the wedding feast and the wicked husbandman, and the solemn warning to those on whom the stone should fall. The Gospels are in fact interwoven with so many prophecies that no one who took the books seriously could think of tearing them out. For besides foretelling the fate of the city and the temple, Jesus over and over again foretold his own betrayal, desertion, arrest, and trial, his crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension, the coming of the Holy Ghost, the divisions his message would cause, and the prosecution and death of his disciples. Collectively and individually, these things are of the very tissue of the gospel text. I find it hard that to believe that there wasn't some first draft of the Gospels that was not written divinely, because at the end of the day, it wasn't like magically written like nobody wrote it, right? Some witness among the ones keeping their mouths shut was making documentation. You know, at the Last Supper, nobody said, okay, and the four guys that we agreed we're going to write everything down, you guys just got to make sure you record everything that happens. Even when I go alone to pray, like, tell people what I did when I was alone and you didn't see me, right? Tell them what I did, even though you weren't a witness to it because I went alone, right? The gospel is mythology, guys. Otherwise, there is no alone. It would have said, and then Mark went in to watch Jesus pray as such, right? and he was the only one there with him to record and witness the event. It would have said that if the Bible was being fucking honest with you. But no, it said he went alone. And this is why idiots think the Bible was literally divinely whatever. And that's definitely not the approach that this introduction is framing the Bible as we're talking about, archaeological discovering the artifacts, discovering original copies of ancient scriptures and things like that. Okay? So, its language is self-evident. It is written in the language of mythology. The author is acting like the director of a film. He doesn't exist. Which then makes you imagine the God's eye perspective. This is what happens when you are the director of a film. This witness, who's not only the witness to the thing, but could you do it again? Like Broski, wait, did you hit his left ear or his right ear? I don't remember now. I can't, if I lie about this, God's going to strike me dead. Could you fucking arrest him again, officer? You don't get to do that if this is real. Right? He got all those fucking details. They arrested Jesus and the guards never said one thing to the guy who was the witness writing everything. Hey, who are you in the corner writing everything down? It's just like he would have been under arrest too. It's like, but anyway, what of our author himself? Unlike those of the gospel writers, his identity and history are not open to question, and his character is known perhaps too well. Unlike them, he figures largely in his own pages, not only because he took a prominent and highly individual part in the war, but because he enjoyed talking about himself and had a high opinion of his own excellences. And, excuse me, no unusual trait in Roman literacy circles. He was moreover the writer of an autobiography of Apologia pro vita sua. Joseph ben Matthias, who was later to call himself Flavius Josephus, taking like a freed slave the name of his master. He was born in AD 37, the year of Caligula's accession. Is that accession or supposed to be ascension? And lived to be 63. By birthright, a priest, and on his mother's side, the descendant of kings. Conspicuous at 14, his precocity and continuing his education till he was 19, he was destined to become a politician, soldier, orator, and historian. His earlier years were spent in his own country, but in 64, the year in which Nero watched the burning of Rome, he visited that city on a mission to the imperial government. His efforts evidently won him a reputation for when, in 66, the Great Rebellion was brought about by the surprising defeat of Cestius, he was, in spite of his youth, made governor of Galilee. How he organized his province, how he came to be the prisoner of Vespasian, and how he thenceforth served the Romans with unswerving devotion, is fully and graphically related in the pages of this book. Readers will reach their own conclusions about his conduct, to which we must refer later. No one who reads his account will be surprised to learn that at the end of the war he became a Roman citizen and an imperial pensioner, and that he accepted from Vespasian the revenues of land confiscated from his unfortunate fellow countrymen, settled down comfortably in an apartment set aside for him in the emperor's house, followed Roman precedent by divorcing an unsatisfactory the mother of his son and wedding an heiress, and spent the rest of his life writing successful works, of which a primary motive was to prove that the Romans had been right in way they had done, while he himself had not only been justified in going over to their side, but was a loyal Jew after all. 4 works have come down to us, published, it is almost certain, in the following order, varying greatly in style and literary quality, according to the amanuenses employed to assist his halting Greek. So we have the Jewish War, which is what we're going to read. By far the most interesting in Josephus' writings and most complete record we possess of an important period of Roman history. First written in Aramaic, then translated into Greek, and probably published in more than one edition. Considerable additions and alterations being made, it will not escape notice that the title, identical in form with the Punic War, or the Gallic War, shows how completely the author had placed himself on the Roman side. Antiquities of the Jews, a much longer work, overlapping the early chapters of the Jewish War, very dull in parts, but containing much valuable historical information. Life, mainly in answer to the suggestion that Josephus had been the cause of the Jewish War. To disprove this, he gives an account of his own doings in Galilee, at many points irreconcilable with the account in the Jewish War. In the opinion of some scholars, this part of the book was written before the war, and with the addition of very brief summaries of earlier and later events published many years later as the life. So, hold on. How do you write a book to say you didn't cause a war that didn't happen yet, and then release it after it happened? That's you see, that's very weird to me, and I'd have to look and see how they're rationalizing that, and see what we understand from that today. And then, against Apion, a counterblast to an anti-Semitic outburst from Alexandria, by far the best written of the 4 works, published like life at the turn of the century. Okay, so his best work was a counter-anti-Semitic hit piece. Those are always a classic, aren't they? But anyway, we'll find out what's going on there. Of Josephus himself, we know nothing beyond what he tells us in his own writings. The picture that emerges is by no means a pleasant one. The traitor of Jerusalem, as Dr. Cecil Roth calls him, has damned himself for all time by his own accounts of what he did at Jotapata. Surely the most appalling story of cowardice, duplicity, and treason ever penned. What makes it the more horrifying is the absence of any sense of shame. Josephus vaunts his abominable behavior after claiming credit for all the heroic efforts of the Jews to hurl the Romans back. He treats his unspeakable act of destruction as his crowning achievement, the final proof of his greatness. But steadfast support of a cause was beyond him. Had he not earlier toyed in turn with all 3 rival philosophies of religion, those of Pharisees, Sadducees, and Essenes? And had he not virtually abandoned the faith of his fathers, for though he put the most improbable pseudo-Jewish monotheistic religious language into the mouth of Titus, the emissary of God, who now dwelt in Italy, he shows only too clearly that his own outlook has become pagan. His writings are full of allusions to Greek religious concepts, to impiety, omens, fortune, fate, nemesis, metempsychosis, and avenging furies. Now you see, Actually, I kind of like all those parts, right? But the problem is that um, anybody can apply those to their own thing. Before his final traitorous act, it is plain from his own account that he had long been seeking an opportunity to desert. The great army he had raised and trained on the Roman model had been allowed to melt away. Those who were keen to fight for their country were treated as enemies and scoundrels. The towns he had forfeited so strongly were left undefended, and as soon as he himself was trapped in Jonapeta, he did his utmost to slip away and leave his countrymen to their fate, as he tells us with such blatant effrontery. Right, so he has no courage or integrity to stand with his ship, right? He goes down with the ship, maritime law. So he breaks this maritime law, this idea the captain goes down with the ship, right? Because we all know that by this point, civilizations are all coastal civilizations are corrupted by the Sea People's Federation that broke up eventually by this time, but their remnants became basically the strongest merchant class because they were the best naval men, and they just took their relationships underground. So the Sea People's Federation, very important link that is probably not in this book, but probably has threads that weren't connected to them at that time, because the Sea People's Federation was not much to be spoken of at the time that this book was translated in the 1940s, and would have been before the time of Josephus as well, because this is going way the fuck back. Anyway, before his final traitorous act, it is plain from his own account that he had long been seeking an opportunity to desert. The great army he had raised and trained on the Roman model had been allowed to melt away. Those who were keen to fight for their country were treated as enemies and scoundrels. Doesn't that sound familiar? You don't say. Please, tell me more things about current events. The towns he had fortified so strongly were left undefended. And as soon as he himself was trapped in Jotapita, he did his utmost to... I'm sorry, I already... I read all that, but it had to be read again. Just because even I didn't even fully grasp that, right? It's like, oh yeah. You see what's happening here, right? Nor was treason his only crime. In his governorship of Galilee, he practiced the foulest deception on his fellow Jews, following it up with acts of horrifying brutality, all recorded with the same self-satisfaction. Yet the atrocities committed by his pet aversion, John of Gischala, and the other fighting leaders, he denounces with the utmost vehemence, though it is obvious that he thoroughly enjoyed the retailing of horrors. For instance, in spite of his pretense that he can hardly bring himself to relate the story of the woman who devoured her child, he evidently gets immense pleasure out of the long-drawn relation of this gruesome tale, adorned with a wealth of manifestly invented detail. Our author has other traits also that modern readers will find little to their taste. He moralizes over the whole agonizing tragedy of his nation, proclaiming that it was just what those abominable Jews deserved. He gloats over the terrible fate of his personal enemies and exults over the loathsome triumphal display staged in Rome by the two conquerors whose boots he is never tired of licking. He does not express even the mildest disapproval as he records the atrocities of which they were guilty. The throwing by Vespasian of living, fettered men into the Dead Sea by way of scientific experiment. The duplicity by means of which he lured 38,000 helpless Jews into Tiberias, there to be butchered if infirm, sold into slavery if physically sound, the killing by Titus of thousands of Jewish prisoners in theater after theater in celebration of family birthdays, the horrible spectacle of innocent men thrown to the beasts, compelled to fight each other to the death or burnt alive. This is talking about large operations. This is talking about something where people were agreeable to this. There was a sufficient amount of a population that could support the other side of the population letting the government do that, and a government very interested in doing that. This is, this is the eradication of people whom you just looking at people and you're just saying, like, you're just terrible for who we are, even though you're me. Like, okay, I'm a Jew, you're a Jew. God, you are a terrible Jew. You're just gonna have to go. Only Jews like me are gonna stick around. We're gonna feed you the lions. Like, that's basically what is being conveyed that Josephus did. And people of his ilk. Neither errors of taste nor moral insensibility need necessarily detract from the value of a book, right? Because remember, if he's doing the politician thing, right? He's got the body politic, like, he is the product of people that are evil, right? It's just like, it's evil out in the open to be doing shit like that. So this is publicly accepted, like this is a description of an evil culture, and this is their evil representative who does the evil the way they like to see the evil done, right? Excuse me. How much longer is this introduction? It's pretty long. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. I've been rolling for about 45 minutes, and I don't want to burn out my voice. So what I'm gonna do is, is gonna take a little break and go back to the music that we were listening to. Gonna run another song. What I played at the intro is this new black metal that came out that I was digging. It's like a cosmic it's like a cosmic black metal thing. It's fucking cool. Labyrinthus Stellarum. The album's called Rift in Reality, and so that was track 1 was Voyager or Voyages Voyagers, and then Ravenous Planet. So this is Ravenous Planet. There we go. Back from the break. Giving you some nice, tight shit. That's some tight shit. I love that vibe. That's a good vibe check. It's the reason why I like bands like Blood Incantation as well, because they got a little bit of that. Cosmicism is just a cool part of my vibe check. Anyway, let's have back at it. There we go. I got Lock off in the backdrop somewhere. Hopefully he just settles in the corner and doesn't go crazy. I hope I didn't hear him just make the sound. That better not be the sound I thought it was. I'll check it later. Alright, Alright, where was I? I was down. No. Up one or so. Sorry, I think I lost the page. No. Okay. My bad. Right, the Cataline thing. Not the book. Domestic Tangles. No. This. There was a little... man, I saw the little bit for it. There, that's what I was looking for. At the time when this translation was begun, anyone who wished to study the writings of Josephus was faced with a serious difficulty. The scholarly and most readable bilingual edition by St. John Thackeray in the Loeb Classics, which happily is once more on sale. All right, I see what he's doing. All right. Anyway, is once more on sale, was out of print, and secondhand copies were almost unobtainable. The fortunate possessors steadfastly refusing to part with them. If the students had the desire, the ability, and the patience to study the author's works in the original language, he might lay his hand on a copy printed at Geneva in 1611 or at Basel in 1544 in lovely type, but full of mysterious abbreviations and fancy combinations of letters. If he wished to read an English translation, he was unlikely to find anything in the bookshops except Whiston's famous version, already over 2 centuries old, though he might be lucky enough to light on a copy of Traill's Victorian version with its many beautiful but blah. My eyes. English translation. He was unlikely to find anything in the bookshop except Winston's famous version. No, wait. 54, a lovely type, but full of mysterious revision. English translations. He was unlikely to find anything in the bookshops except Whiston's famous version, already over 2 centuries old, though he might be lucky enough to light on a copy of Traill's Victorian version with its many beautiful but not very helpful illustrations. Well, it's interesting that it's Traill's Victorian. So Traills are, that makes me think of the word thrall, because trail and thrall kind of have a relationship as words. And the thrall, of course, is the lower caste. That's the some would say the slave caste, right? But it's really just a word for the general public, right? Like the people that are just out doing their thing. They need work, they work, right? Or whatever, right? They're the ones not too involved with the greater whole of things, right? And so you can feel like a slave when resentment based on the consequences of everyone upcast is falling apart, right? Um, and it's part of the reasons why eventually um, the original control system, which was the breeding system, had to be dismantled, right? It's going to be very interesting getting context from this with what I know so far, especially with the Bach saga angle. We owe a debt of gratitude, for it is through his labors that generations have been able to study not only the Jewish War, but all Josephus's writings. But it would be untrue to suggest that his translations is either scholarly or readable. It is frequently inaccurate, sometimes grossly so, in passage after passage. The meaning is obscure or non-existent, and in spite of quaint expressions and occasional felicitous phrases, it is very clumsy and a poor specimen, indeed, of 18th century prose. Nor did Whiston exercise any restraint over that's annotation 1. In addition to the description of the Roman army in chapter 11, students of the art of war will find descriptions of siege tactics at Jotapata, Gamala, Jerusalem, and Masada of enthralling interest. Students of the art of war he didn't say that in capitals or quotations. I don't think he meant Sun Tzu. I think he just is using art of war as the expression that it is. Because, like, any military school is effectively going to be doing such as what Sun Tzu wrote the title of his book to be. Nor did Whiston exercise any restraint over his own loquacity. His principle seems to have been never to use one word if 2 or 3 would do. Translations of ancient books are intended to serve a variety of purposes. The Victorian crib gave a word-for-word rendering, often in deplorable English, the object of which was to assist struggling schoolboys to construe the allotted portion. As long as they found out which word was which, they were not required to produce a version in recognizable English. Other translations intended for the use of more mature scholars succeeded in avoiding translations which remain fairly literal. A third type is intended for the ordinary reader who knows no such Greek or Latin but wants to know what the author had to say. Such versions need not be literal. They may be free paraphrases, and yet, did he mean 3? And it said free? Is that a typo? And yet give a far truer impression of the original. But they are written in the living language. They have the true flow, and they may even be works of literature. Nowadays, very few can read Greek, even if Greek texts are available, and the present translation is naturally intended for the ordinary reader. For that reason, my first aim has been to make it lucid and readable. But I trust I have not departed too far from the original to be of service to any who may wish to use it in conjunction with the Greek. In my anxiety to make the translation readable, I have devoted special care to the speeches. These, except where the style is peculiarly stilted, I have endeavored to turn into English that is what is really spoken, allowing the speakers to seem like human beings. I cannot understand how a first-rate translator in this 20th century could put into their mouths such moth-eaten expressions as verily, to boot, scurvy villain, or perdition take thee, most impious wretch. See, I fucking love that. That's the way I love fucking shit that, like Like, that's good shit. Like, that is that's like, I find, like, if I can say words like that instead of fuck you, like, saying fuck you is like, I got nothing, right? You know? That's all that it means. Like, if you're hit hard and your feelings are hurt and all you got is fuck you, right? That just means you just got fucking nothing. And maybe you got nothing because it was a betrayal, right? And you aren't in a state of countering because you're still in a bit of shock that you've been hurt. So there's no finesse. There's like no ego theoretically involved. You know, I mean, other than, I mean, like there's the like I'm not interested in hiding my ego or hiding behind my ego. I just want to jump straight to, like, you know, here's how I fucking feel about it, you know, because, you know, like, that was just horribly insult, right? Anyway, I don't want to go on about that, but it's like, if you can hit them with that shit, like, the only thing that fucking matters is your energy. It's just like, because taking what someone says seriously is a fucking choice, right? As long as I take myself seriously, as long as at the end of the day I hold my posture, then yeah, I'm going to fucking call you a scurvy villain. In order that what Josephus wrote may be intelligible to the ordinary reader, I have departed in several respects from the practices of my predecessors in the first place. I have changed many expressions that are no longer part of our language, and in some cases not likely to be understood. Cubits have been converted to yards, feet, or inches. Okay, see, that's a fucking problem, because a cubit is not a fucking yard. You're fucking with math. You're straight up changing the numbers. That changes the numbers. Now, if we're talking about numerology, as long as you don't actually change the numbers written, then the numerology is going to work, but your proportions are going to be wrong. A cubit wasn't a word for a yard. A cubit meant something, which I think that was the cubit, right? And so, in short, it was just like the elbow to the tip of the finger of the Caesar is the cubit. Okay? How long is a cubit? Who's the Caesar? Measure his arm. Okay? That's Rome. Okay? So anyway, feet or inches, stades or furlongs into miles, amphorae into gallons. Like, it's just like, he should have just used those words and then just wrote down a little numeric translation of, a cubit was precisely 2 feet and 3 inches, right? And so that way you just understood the measurement, or just put the effort in to say it was 2 feet 3 inches and just forget a word altogether. If you're going to bother to put in a fucking word, these are words of fucking measurement. So I'm going to bitch about that just a little bit. But as long as he didn't change the numbers themselves, it's not a big problem, because at least you have your proper numbers to reference, but you just have to go back and get the actual fucking measurements to understand the spatial relationship of things in history. In the second place, the hours of the day and watches of the night, varying according to the time of year, and so so mystifying to readers of Caesar or St. Mark, have been replaced by the AM and PM system, which the reader may be interested to note must have been actually in use during our author's lifetime if we are to make sense of the allusions to time in the fourth gospel. The third liberty I have taken is with the names of places. I see no point in employing unusual spelling just because Josephus has done so, and all names known to readers of the New Testament appear in this version in their familiar form. Non-biblical names that have changed little appear in their modern form. Berytus as Beirut, while those that have changed beyond recognition retain their Greek form. For instance, Sebaste and Scythopolis must be, is this a Scythian city? Scythopolis? Because when I see Scyth, Skith or Scyth, I think I think Scythians, which who knows, maybe they got something to do with where we get the Sith from. And the Scythians may have been kind of the good guys, or one of the good guys out there, right? Maybe. I'm not sure. I mean, I've heard some good press, but it's been a while. I'm still getting I hear about I hear more about the footnote of the Scythians as an origin to this and that, but never. But there's only a handful of accounts that get talked about the Scythians as they lived, right? Because it was still in that wild, largely pre-standardized writing world. I mean, nomadic steppe horse lords. Who the fuck needs to write when you live like that? You ain't need to write one goddamn fucking thing down. Hey, what's up, Peaceful? Okay. I hope that this is a sensible compromise. I have retained the name Syria, which, e.g. in Chapter 9, covers all Jewish areas of what we loosely call Palestine. As regards Jewish names of men, I have used the Old Testament spellings such as Elijah and Jeshua, not Elias and Jesus. Lastly, I have divided the book into chapters which correspond, I hope, to the natural divisions of the subject matter, and have provided them with carefully chosen titles. Any reader who may wish to compare this version with Whiston's will find in the appendix the necessary correlations of my chapter with his. In the first edition of this book, a further liberty was taken more presumptuous than any of these. Numerous passages of varying lengths which interrupt the narrative and obscure the connection of thoughts were removed from their positions in the manuscripts. The 9 longest of these passages were transferred to the end of the book and printed as excursuses, or excursuses, like excuses? That I don't know if excursuses is a word or if that's excuses, but I'm going to go with excursuses because it's fun to pronounce new words. It's got the word curse in it so that's kind of interesting too. The many short ones appeared as footnotes in Roman type to distinguish them from my own comments and explanations, which were printed in italics. My object may be stated in Josephus' own words, to secure coherence and continuity in narrative in the Preston edition. However, in defense to the wishes of Dr. Reo's successor, Mrs. Betty Radice, these passages have all been restored to their original positions in order, therefore, to enable the reader who may wish to do so to study some of Josephus's very interesting descriptions without having to dig them out of the long narratives in which they are hidden away. I append here a list of the 10 longest with the chapters in which they occur. So Jewish sects, Ptolemaeus and the crystalline sands, Galilee, Perea, Samaria, and Judea, the Roman army, Gennesareth, Jordan Valley and the Dead Sea, Jerusalem and the Temple, Machaerus, the defenses of Masada, the Temple of Onias. May I, in conclusion, express the confident hope that the students of history, and most of all those to whom the new light shed on the New Testament is precious, will find the reading of Josephus' Jewish War amply worthwhile. All right, so that's the introductions. Now here is the English translation of the book as Josephus himself wrote it. I don't know if this may also, I think the preface is also part of the translation, or part of the editorial notes, if you will. Okay. All right, but before I take a nice deep dive into this, I need to take a deep dive into this, because this is going to be quite something. Preface. The War of the Jews against the Romans was the greatest of our time. Greater, too, perhaps, than any recorded struggle, whether between cities or nations. Yet persons with no first-hand knowledge, accepting baseless and inconsistent stories on hearsay, have written garbled accounts of it, while those of eyewitnesses have been falsified either to flatter the Romans or to vilify the Jews, eulogy or abuse being substituted for factual record. So, for the benefit of the emperor's subjects, I have decided to translate into Greek the books which I wrote some time ago in my native language for circulation in the Middle East. I myself... Okay, so, this is Josephus' own preface. Okay. Josephus, son of Matthias, am a Hebrew by race and a priest from Jerusalem. In the early stages, I fought against the Romans, and of later events, I was an unwilling witness. This upheaval, as I said, was the greatest of all time, and when it occurred, Rome herself... I wonder if he used a female pronoun, because typically that's what's done, right? When you're talking about a place that holds things, like that holds a world together, that holds a concept together, like a city, a home, or whatever. Like it's usually feminine in nature because it's reflective of a female spirit or goddess. Jewish revolutionaries took advantage of the general disturbance. They had vast resources of men and money, and so widespread was the ferment that some were filled with hope of gain, others with fear of loss, by the state of affairs in the East, for the Jews expected all their Mesopotamian brethren to join their insurrection. From another side, Roman supremacy was being challenged by the Gauls on their border, and Celts were restive. In fact, after Nero's death disorder reigned everywhere. Presented with this opportunity, many aspired to the imperial throne, while the soldiery were eager for a transference of power as a means of enriching themselves. I, therefore, thought it inexcusable, when such issues were involved, to see the truth misrepresented and to take no notice. Parthians, Babylonians, Southern Arabians, Mesopotamian Jews, and Assyrians, thanks to my labors, were accurately informed of the causes of the war, the suffering it involved, and its disastrous endings. Were the Greeks and those Romans who took no part in it to remain ignorant of the facts, deluded with flattery or fiction? Yet the writers I have in mind claim to be writing history. Though beside getting all their facts wrong, they seem to me to miss their targets altogether, for they wish to establish the greatness of the Romans, while all the time disparaging and deriding the actions of the Jews. But I do not see how men can prove themselves great by overcoming feeble opponents. Again, they are not impressed by the length of the war, the vastness of the Roman forces, which endured such hardships, and the genius of their commanders, whose strenuous endeavors before Jerusalem will bring them little glory if the difficulties they overcame are belittled. However, it is not my intention to counter the champions of the Romans by exaggerating the heroism of my own countrymen. I will state the facts accurately and impartially. At the same time, the language in which I record the events will reflect my own feelings and emotions, for I must permit myself to bewail my country's tragedy. She was destroyed by internal dissensions, and the Romans, who so unwillingly set fire to the temple, were brought in by the Jews, self-appointed rulers, as Titus Caesar, the temple's destroyer, has testified, for throughout the war he pitied the common people who were helpless against the partisans, and over again he delayed the capture of the city and prolonged the siege in the hope that the ringleaders would submit. If anyone criticizes me for the accusations I bring against the party chiefs and their gangs of bandits, or for my laments over the misfortunes of my country, he must pardon my weakness regardless of the rules of historical writing. For it so happened that of all the cities under Roman rule, our own reached the highest summit of prosperity, and in turn fell into the lowest depths of misery. The misfortunes of all other races since the beginning of history compared to those of the Jews seem small. And for our misfortunes, we have ourselves to blame. So hold on, let me get that. So hold on. The misfortunes of all other races since the beginning of history compared to those of the Jews seem small. Okay, this is pre-Spanish Inquisition, this is being said. This is this is pre Mean Mr. Mustache, right? It's always been the worst for them. It's always been the worst, right? It hasn't. It hasn't been the worst. The worst are the fucking tribes of people that never even knew a goddamn thing about Jews, who maybe were around for thousands and thousands of years, perhaps, as their own little thing that spawned off of a group that was millions of years old, perhaps, that ain't around anymore. Got completely bred out of into oblivion, and an original stock of their kind died off. Right? You know, all of that perhaps because maybe somebody entrapped them in a wasteland and they had no food, and they couldn't keep up their numbers or get out of their gene pool. Right? They were put into like a slum, basically, by being put into a wasteland. You know, or they all got captured because they were a small tribe by another slightly larger tribe who wanted to profit off of selling them to some empire that some Roman Jewish slaver, maybe by that point, was taking care of things, right? Let's, you know, just like, oh, poor us who have it's just like, no, not poor you. You keep fucking surviving. You keep fucking surviving. Maybe the stories are true, or maybe it's just haters that resent you, but, you're like a Batman villain. We're like Batman. We do brutal things to you because you did brutal things exploiting us. And then any decent human being would rid you from the planet because they understand, they get it, finally, you're some sort of repeat offender, and we're not going to have any more blood on our hands now that we have this situation under control. But no, that's not what we do as a society. That's not what Batman does. Right? So that's like the Joker complaining that Batman always thwarts his plans. That's how ludicrous. That's the Joker. Just imagine the Joker plays the victim just because his plans fell through, thanks to the Batman. It's perfect supervillainy. Anyway. Anyway, that's the kind of attitude I'm looking for. Show me a little bit more of that Loxism, buddy. Let's get some Loxism going. I wonder how much Loxism I'm going to find in this book. And for our misfortunes, we have only ourselves to blame. How then could I master my feelings if anyone disposed to pass harsh judgment on my emotion? He must remember that the facts belong to the story, and only the grief is the writer's. On the other hand, criticism may fairly be leveled at those Greek scholars who, knowing that the wars of the past fade into significance beside the astonishing events of their own time, sit in judgment upon the latter and severely censure those who make an effort to record them. For though their own flow of words is greater, their historical sense is inferior. They write histories themselves about the Assyrians and Medes, implying that the earlier writers did not do the work properly. Yet they are no more a match for them as writers than as thinkers, for the old historians were all eager to set down the events of their own lifetime, and their participations in those events gave vitality to their account, while it was impossible to depart from the truth. Sorry, hold on a second. Oh, okay, that's the bottom of the page. The truth without being detected. Surely, to leave a permanent record of contemporary events to the benefit of posterity is worthy of the highest praise, and the real work is not the man who merely changes the order and arrangement of another man's work, but the one who has something new to say and constructs a historical edifice of his own. I myself have gone to great trouble and expense, though an alien. Hold on a second. I myself have gone to great trouble and expense, though an alien, so that I may offer to the Greeks and Romans a permanent record of their triumphs. Native writers, on the other hand, though the chance of profit from litigation find them possessed of ready tongues and an unlimited flow of words when they turn to history, which requires them to speak the truth after laboriously collecting the facts. So this is another interesting thing, right? Like here he is. So Josephus was a legal alien of Rome in his time. And this is telling you what legal and illegal aliens can do in your world. Okay, let's see here. Native writers, on the other hand, though the chance of profit from litigation finds them possessed or ready of ready tongue and an unlimited flow of words, when they turn to history, which requires them to speak the truth after laboriously collecting the facts, appear to be gagged and pass over to inferior writers. Unaware of the facts, the task of recording the achievement of the great, I am determined, therefore, to respect the truth of history, though it has been neglected by the Greeks. An account of the early history of the Jews, their origin, their exodus from Egypt. The exodus of Egypt, that's another misconstruement in its framing mechanism of what actually happened and with who. And that gets into that gets into all sorts of that's all cult of Aton. The issue in the book of Exodus was the Atonists, which also were the Adonists, Adonai, right? It's all these, like, there's all sorts of things going on there because the Jews weren't the only aliens in Egypt either, right? An account of the early history of the Jews, their origin, their exodus from Egypt, the extent of their wanderings and subsequent conquests, and their removal from their country, would, I think, be out of place here, and in any case unnecessary, for many Jews before me have accurately recorded the doings of our ancestors, and their accounts have been translated into Greek with very few mistakes. But where the Greek historians and our own prophets left off, I shall begin my story. And the events of the war I witnessed, I will relate in greater detail and with all the completeness of which I am capable, whereas events before my time will be run over in brief outline. Starting with Antiochus Epiphanes, who stormed Jerusalem and after holding it for 3.5 years was driven out of the country by the Hasmoneans. I shall explain how their descendants, by their struggles for the throne, forced Pompey and the Romans to intervene, how Antipater's son, Herod, brought in Sosius and put an end to the Hasmonean dynasty, how the people revolted after Herod's death, when Augustus was Roman emperor and Quintilius Varus the local governor, and how in the 12th year of Nero's reign the war broke out with disastrous results to Cestius and remarkable success for Jewish arms in the early encounters. The fortifications of the neighboring towns will occupy us next, and the decision of Nero, in whom Cestius defeats, had aroused fears for the whole empire, To give Vespasian supreme command, the invasion of Jewish territory by Vespasian, assisted by his elder son, the size of the Roman army, and allied contingents with which he overrun Galilee, the capture of the Galilean towns, some by all-out assault, some by negotiation. At this point, I must explain the Roman system of military discipline and legionary training and describe the dimensions and features of the two Galilees and limits of Judea, with the peculiarities of the country, especially the lakes and springs. Of the fate of each of the captured towns, I shall give an exact account based on my own observations and the part I played. It would be pointless to draw a veil over my own misfortunes, with which my readers are so familiar. Next will come the death of Nero at the moment when Jewish hopes were waning, the interruption of Vespasian's advance on Jerusalem by his summons to the throne, the encouragement he received from Portents, and the upheavals in Rome, the insistence of his soldiers on making him emperor despite his protests, the outbreak of party strife among the Jews following his departure for Egypt to settle the affairs of the empire, the tyranny and dissensions of the party chiefs. Right? So, this is all, so all this stuff is happening as an exploitation of Nero's incompetence, debauchery, and corruption. An account must next be given of the second invasion, mounted in Egypt by Titus, the method, place, and size of his troop concentrations, the state of the party-riven city when he arrived, and the series of assaults and erections of the platforms, the sighting of the measurements of the 3 protecting walls, the defenses of the city, and the plan of the temple and sanctuary. All the exact measurements of these, and of the altar, certain customs of the feasts, the 7 grades of purity, the priestly ministrations, the priestly and high priestly vestments, the description of the Holy of Holies, I shall conceal nothing and add nothing to the published facts. Then I shall contrast the brutality of the party chiefs towards their countrymen with the clemency of the Romans towards aliens, and a persistence with which Titus showed his anxiety to save the city, the sanctuary, by inviting the insurgents to come to terms, in discussing the sufferings of the people and the calamities that led to their final defeat. I shall consider how far they were due to enemy action, and how far to party strife, how far to starvation. My account will include misfortunes of the deserters and the punishments inflicted on the prisoners, the burning of the sanctuary despite Caesar's disapproval, and the number of sacred treasures snatched from the flames, captures of the entire city and the signs and wonders that preceded it, the arrest of the party chiefs, the number of people enslaved, and the fates that befell them, the way in which the Romans disposed of the last remnants of the war, demolishing the ramparts of every fort, the progress of Titus through the whole country to establish order, and his return to Italy, and triumphal celebrations. All this I have embraced in 7 books. The annotation says, we cannot say for certain whether the author's 7 books began and ended, nor should the usual divisions into 110 chapters be attributed to him. To those who took part in the war or have ascertained the facts, I have left no ground for complaint or criticism. It is for those who love the truth, not those who seek entertainment, that I have written. I will now begin my story where I began my summary. Okay, that's the preface. So, I just want to take a look here. Alright, so now we're here. This is page 27. And then this chapter goes on for quite a minute. So, let me tell you what. Ooh, wow. Okay, so that's like, what, 20 pages? Yeah. All right. This is fine. Okay, so we will get started here next time. This has been a good session today. And I got a few things I got to do tonight because it is a work night. And it's amazing how fast 2 hours can disappear just wrapping up on everything else that I do. So, this has been perfect. I think I've primed us. Very well. It's going to be quite exciting to look into these footnotes of this well-known book in the proper circles of understanding our hidden history. And in some cases, not necessarily hidden, just you're not looking at it. There's plenty of other things to look at, and you were only taught very small words. If you know big words like me, congratulations, you didn't skip on the value of your mind. Because I certainly notice that if you don't have a good vocabulary, you're typically not very smart. You might be wise, but but you don't know too much, like knowledge, right? You're maybe more, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Anyway, thank you guys so much. I'll figure out when I want to pick this up again, because I may want to use my time after work tomorrow for other things. I'm not sure how I feel. Thank you so much. Be on the lookout. After I made my little drive stream about the Substance movie last week, I was telling a few of my lady friends who are into these kinds of subjects, about women's psychology and image and things like that, about the film, being pretty sure that they're down with hardcore body horror, and I'm going to be planning in the next maybe week or two or so. I'm not 100% sure. I'm planning on having a panel discussion about the subject matter in that film, actually, and I'm going to be doing it with my friend Mario West, and I'm going to do it with her, and I actually picked, for the hell of it, Abby Ramsey, who was just on with Mario West in the first place. But both of these ladies are perfect for talking about the Substance, because Maria is in amazing shape for her age. She is an eldress. She's an eldritch being. She's an eldress in our community. She's an amazing, she's an amazing person like that, and she totally registers like she's maybe closer to my age, right? But she's been involved in. She's got stories from the 1960s. I mean, she's a boomer X cusp, right? So she's a good friend to have generationally, as I am an X millennial cusp. And then Abby is also, I think Abby is Gen X or millennial. She's either young Gen X like me, or older millennial. I don't remember. She's had children. She has children and a family. She's a mom, and she's also a bodybuilder, right? And she looks amazing for her age, and she's all up on holistic medicine and all that stuff, right? And just has this ridiculous chiseled body, and it all looks great, right? And so seeing how these two ladies are taking care of themselves with healthy, mature development as souls, as human beings. There's some great stuff to go. So like I'm really excited because I didn't even like when I showed it to Maria. I didn't think Maria was even gonna. I didn't even ask her if she wanted to do a thing. She brought that up. I just wanted her to watch it because it was so good. It was something that just for her benefit as a kind of film that can get you thinking, right? But she wanted to talk about it with me on the air. I'm like, oh fuck yeah, right? So I'm very super excited to work with Madia West again. So be on the lookout for that. And if you go to my playlist for Trigenesis Radio, where I have my interviews, you'll see the interview with the original interview with me and Madia. Plus, I did the interview of Tom Althouse with Maria on the questionnaire, the conversation panel with Tom. And I can't remember if I did a third thing. I think I've only done those two things with Nadia. But anyway, so that's going to be super exciting stuff. All right, I will catch you guys later.